Healing TV here with an amazing Trap Rogue build for anyone who's leveling all the way up to in-game content. Feel free to use the timestamps below if you're looking for a specific part of this video. And if you enjoy builds, guides, or just straight up Diablo videos in general, then make sure to subscribe. And with that out of the way, let's get into the video. For those of you just starting off the game in Fractured Peaks, it's okay to know that you can leave your starting area and completely leave the main story quest to go do certain things. And for early game, if you want this build to feel like 1,000 times better, you're going to want to leave Fractured Peak to get this aspect. And there's also some other aspects you might want to look through that you can throw into your build early on. So starting off from the main city of Fractured Peaks, you look at your map, the aspect we're going to be trying to get is all the way up here in this dungeon. Pretty easy to get to. You can pin it on your map. If you have any way shrines nearby, you travel to them and just follow the pin. And there's also another way to find it. If you pull up your collections and go to Codex of Power, you can filter to offense, show my class only, and then you're looking for Blade Dancer's aspect. Twisting blades orbit for a short time after they return to you, dealing 10% of twisted blades return damage per hit. Based on the distance the blades return, the orbit damage increases up to 20% of the return damage. Even though this just recently got nerfed, this is still one of the best aspects you can run for this build. From this menu, you can track aspects. I've already completed this one, so I can't track this one specifically, but if I go to one I have not completed, you see I can pin on map. So you just find the one you want, hit pin on map, and then when you pull your map up, it's going to show you the route you take all the way to it. So it'd be this one, and I would just find a near way shrine and travel to that one and complete that dungeon to get that aspect. But like I said, it's this dungeon way up here, kind of northeast of the map. And once you complete that dungeon, all you need to do is and once you get that aspect or any other aspect you might want to run for your build, you just need a legendary or rare item, preferably a rare item, but you can use a legendary or rare. And then you go to a main city and you find this symbol on your map. You're gonna have to be a certain level to unlock this. I believe it's 20, maybe 25, but I think it's 20. Then you just talk to the vendor and you're going to put your item, whatever you want to use. Only certain things can hold certain aspects, so you just have to look out for that, but you're probably going to want to use a weapon for this one. So you put your weapon in, you go to Codex of Power. You can also use aspects if you have some in your inventory, but since you got this from a dungeon, you're going to go Codex of Power, show my class, and then you're going to look for the Blade Dancer's aspect. You're going to select it. It's going to cost you some materials, which if you've been playing up to level 20, you probably have some of these materials. If not, you can get those materials from deconstructing at the blacksmith. For these materials specifically, you have to deconstruct, I believe, legendary and rare items. For the axe, I think it's just legendary weapons. And it's going to cost you a good chunk of gold, but it's going to make, if you have a rare weapon, it's going to make it legendary. So you want to make sure it's got some pretty good stats on it. If you're early game, it's probably not as important to worry about that, and then you just imprint the aspect. And now you have a rare weapon that's turned into a legendary weapon because you put the aspect in it. Early game, I would not recommend doing this for a lot of gear because it can get expensive early game, but late game you'll have a lot of material, so you'll be able to fully customize your build with all the aspects that you want. Some aspects that I run personally in my helmet, I have damaging an elite grants you a barrier absorbing up to 1,296 damage for 10 seconds. This effect can only occur or happen every 30 seconds, which is nice. So pretty much anytime you see an elite and you do any damage to it, you're going to get this nice overshield that's going to protect you for a while. We're pairing that one specifically with this aspect. Deal 42% increased damage while you have a barrier active. So anytime you hit an elite, you're going to get that barrier that makes you tanky, and it's also going to increase your damage. And then in our chest piece, you gain 0.35% increased armor for 4 seconds when you deal any form of damage, stacking up to 35%. This is just going to make us more tanky because this is kind of a squishy build that does a lot of damage, so this helps our survivability. And you don't have to put these specific aspects in any specific armor piece, you can like kind of move them around and put them in whichever piece you need, because you might get some drops with the same aspect but in a different piece, and that's fine. And for our arms, we got dealing direct damage to enemies affected by your trap skills, has up to a 32% chance to make them vulnerable for 3 seconds. We're gonna be using a lot of traps in this build, so you're gonna always pretty much make enemies vulnerable. For my pants, I have Sacred Unique pants, so you're probably gonna want to use something else for the time being. I got lucky with this drop, but if you do manage to find this one, it's amazing for this build. It states, unless it hits a boss or player, Death Trap will continue to rearm itself until it kills an enemy. However, Death Trap's cooldown is increased by 21%. So essentially, if you're like in way higher content or fighting like a really tanky elite, as long as it's not like a boss, then your trap's just going to keep rearming itself and keep giving you all those bonuses from your traps, and just does a lot of damage. You can literally just drop your trap and just not do anything, just watch it kill the elite. If you're in a big group of ads, it's only going to arm itself probably once because it's going to end up killing an ad. But with this build, we have so much cooldown that if you pull a big group and start killing it with your trap will reset itself anyways, and you just have to place the trap again. And in our boots, we have becoming injured while crowd controlled grants you unstoppable for 4 seconds. This effect has a 32-second cooldown. Again, just improving our survivability a bit. You can kind of swap this one out for whatever you want. Onto the jewelry. You have 18% increased critical chance strike against injured enemies. While you are healthy, you gain 36% increased crowd control duration. This one's good for damage, and also we have crowd control in both of our traps, so this just helps out with that crowd control. In our first ring, we have basic skills grant 29% attack speed. We're using a lot of basic skills, and our attack speed stacking like that is just extra forms of damage. It's not our main source of damage, but it's just nice to have. In our other ring, I have thorn damage. Thorn's damage dealt has a 34% chance to deal damage to all enemies around you. You're still gonna take that damage, and it's just gonna help damage enemies. For our weapons, we have, of course, twisting blades. You already know what that one does. That is the only one you really need in this build. Everything else you can kind of swap in and out. In late game, you obviously want the Sacred Unique Death Trap. And for our other weapon, I also have another Sacred Unique, but you can also swap this out for whatever. Hits with this weapon increases attack speed by 5% for 4 seconds, up to 25%. This is going to make our attack speed go crazy. On top of that one with the ring, it's going to help overall damage output, which our basic attack has chances of making enemies vulnerable. So this is just going to proc that way more and make everything vulnerable around us. Again, there's probably better things like late game for Sacred Uniques and for this slot, but just kind of fill it out and you can put whatever you want in for this one. For your consumables, you should be using a resist if you're having trouble with a certain thing like fire damage or something. But if not, you should be using maybe attack speed. And you also have dexterity incense. You can pop 1 incense and 1 elixir at a time, so you can have 2 going. And your incense also helps allies around you. So when I pop it, you can see there's a radius around me. That'll help for allies, and the radius will also get that buff. For your incense, you can use defensive stuff, but you can also use things to buff your dexterity. And as you can see, incense and elixir stack, but as soon as you die, the incense will come off of you and the elixir will stay on you for that time period. For your specializations, I would highly recommend, as soon as you're high enough level, a quest will appear and you can track the quest through this menu, and you go complete the quest and you will unlock the first one, which is combo points, which is okay. And once you get higher level, I think it's like every 10 levels you unlock another one, so it's like 15, maybe 25. Don't quote me on that, I'm not 100% sure. But once you unlock Inner Sight, this is what you'll be using for this build. It's a way to get your energy back and have pretty much unlimited energy for 4 seconds. It's just gonna randomly mark a target, and when you're attacking those targets who are marked, it'll fill up a gauge on the bottom of your screen, and once that gauge gets full, you'll have unlimited energy for 4 seconds, so you can completely spam your Twisted Blades ability. Now looking into the skill tree, for our basic attack, we're using Puncture. This is just gonna allow you to have a little range, so you're not always up close and personal. You're gonna throw blades, dealing damage, and every third cast will slow enemies and critical strikes will always slow enemies. And then enhanced puncture, gain 2 energy when puncture damages crowd control enemies. We're going to be having a lot of crowd control, and this will help us get a lot of energy back. And we're also using fundamental puncture. Punctures now throw 3 blades in a spread, each dealing 35% of its base damage. Hitting an enemy with at least 2 blades at once makes them vulnerable for 2 seconds. Since we're trying to ramp that attack speed up with some certain things and the spread of the 3 blades, this is going to allow you to make pretty much all the enemies nearby vulnerable, which is going to make them take more damage. After putting 2 skills in, so you can stop at the second one for now, and when you get more skill points, come back and unlock this one. And after you get 2 skill points in, it will unlock this tree, which you want to go Twisted Blades. That's going to pair with that aspect. Impale enemies with your blades, dealing X amount of damage and make them take 8% increased damage from you while impaled. After 1.5 seconds, the blades will return to you and deal X amount of damage. Also, Twisted Blades deal 30% increased damage when returning, and we're using advanced twisting blades. When your twisting blades return, your active cooldowns are reduced by 0.10 second per enemy they pass through, up to 2 seconds. So the goal with this is to get it to pass through as many enemies as possible, and it's gonna reset all your cooldowns if you have like a big group of adds, which is gonna allow you to spam your abilities and your traps. As far as your passives go on this tree, we're going to be using Sturdy. You gain 12% close range damage reduction, and Siphoning Strikes heal for 3% of your maximum life when you critically strike close enemies. You're always going to be on close enemies, so you know you're always going to be critically striking them, and this is going to heal you up so much when you drop your ultimate trap. You don't have to put points into these like right away. You don't even have to max Twisted Blades out right away. You kind of want to go through the tree and then come back and max certain things out so you can get like 1 point in here, you know, but you definitely want the final tree of Twisted Blades. Once you unlock the next tree, you're going to be using Shadow Step. It's going to allow you to teleport behind an enemy, doing X amount of damage, gaining movement speed for 2 seconds. You're going to also use Enhanced Shadow Step. Damaging an enemy with Shadow Step increases your critical chance strike against them for 8% for 3 seconds. Preferred to use on an elite to give you more critical strike against them so you can melt them faster. And also Methodical Shadow Step. Enemies damaged by Shadow Step are stunned for 2 seconds. This just helps with that crowd control to keep you alive since you're kind of squishy. After that, you want to try to move on down to the next tree, but once you can come back and have more points, you want Weapon Mastery for sure. This just increases things based off of what you're using. So daggers or swords, I try to use daggers. 15% increased damage to healthy enemies. Using swords, it's just 9% increased damage, which is nice. And then I use Concussive because with our traps, we're going to be knocking down and knocking back enemies a lot. And that's going to allow us to gain 12% increased critical chance strike against them for 3 seconds. Moving on to the next skill tree, I'm using Dark Shroud. This one you don't really want to max out at this point, but getting a point or 2 in there is fine. It's going to put 5 protective shadows around you, and it's going to give you damage reduction per active shadow, so it's going to make you a lot tankier, and then the shadows will be consumed when enemies are like hitting you. You're always going to want to be using this ability as soon as it's up just to make you more tanky. And then Enhanced Dark Shroud. Dark Shroud shadows have a 10% chance not to be consumed, which is pretty nice. Just lets you survive longer. Also, the bottom part of this, each active shadow from Dark Shroud grants you 4% increased movement speed. As long as this is up, you're gonna have more movement speed. It's just nice to be faster. Now the main ability from this one is Poison Trap. You only want 1 point into it, but this is gonna allow you to place a trap that applies X amount of poison damage over 9 seconds to the enemies in the area. You can have 4 armed traps at once, which is nice. So you can kind of spam them with your cooldowns. Also Enhanced Poison Trap. Poison traps knock down enemies for 1.5 seconds. This is an amazing form of CC because of your cooldowns. You'll pretty much always have this up and you can spam it and just constantly be knocking enemies down and poisoning them. You don't need to go further into this tree. This is all you want for now. As far as your passives go for this tree, you're going to use Exploit. You deal 18% increased damage to healthy enemies and injured enemies. Also Malice, you deal 9% increased damage to vulnerable enemies. enemies. We're gonna be making all enemies vulnerable pretty much, so this is just gonna increase that damage output. Onto this next tree, we don't have any active abilities. We're not using any imbuements or anything, but if you want to be tankier, you should definitely get a point into deadly venom. This just increases your poison damage. You're not really worried about that. You're just trying to get to this one. Whenever you poison an enemy, you're going to take 15% less damage. That's at tier 3, and this just makes you a lot tankier, and you're spamming your poison constantly, knocking enemies down. So as long as you're keeping enemies poisoned, they're going to be doing a lot less damage to you. Moving on to our ultimate skill, we're using Death Trap. This is our bread and butter. This thing is amazing. You place a trap that arms after 1.25 seconds, which can kind of get you in trouble because you don't really realize it doesn't activate right away. So you have to make sure you know that, but it activates. You can set this down and it'll be on the ground, and then you can lure enemies into it, or you can just pull a big mob of enemies and just drop it on them. But once enemies move into it, it's going to deal X amount of damage to enemies in the area. And with Prime Death Trap, enemies are pulled into Death Trap when it activates. It's just going to suck everyone into the middle, which is a nice form of CC. And then Supreme Death Trap, if Death Trap kills an enemy, its cooldown is reduced by 10 seconds. So if you pull a big mob, more than likely it's going to kill quite a few of them and just pretty much instantly reset it, which is amazing. And if you happen to get lucky and get the Sacred Unique that makes Death Trap rearm itself until it kills an enemy, it's just going to keep dropping Death Traps until it kills something. So if you're fighting like an elite one-on-one that's really tanky, you can literally just drop one Death Trap and it'll just keep rearming over and over until it kills that enemy. It's pretty amazing. And then for our passives, you don't have to worry about these right away, but you definitely want Trap Mastery for sure. When Poison Trap or Death Trap activates, you gain 12 increased critical chance strike against vulnerable and crowd control enemies for 4 seconds. We're making those enemies crowd controlled through the traps themselves, and also enemies should be vulnerable from your basic attacks. Then we're using Innervation, Lucky Hit, up to 30% chance to gain 8 energy. Just nice to get our energy back so we can spam our Twisted Blades more. And Alchemist Fortune, non-physical damage to you, has a 15% chance to increase lucky hit chance. We're also using 1 point into Adrenaline Rush. When moving, you gain 5% increased energy. So just whenever you're running around, you're gaining energy back. But also mainly haste. While you're above 50% maximum energy, you gain 15% increased movement speed. While below 50% energy, you gain 15% increased attack speed. So pretty much you're benefiting from either side of that. And down into our key passive, we're using Exposure. Lucky Hit, dealing direct damage to an enemy affected by a trap skill, has up to a 25% chance to reduce the active cooldowns of your trap skills by 20%. Drop a cluster of exploding stun grenades that deal X amount of total physical damage and stuns enemies. So this is just gonna make your traps insanely better. For my Paragon board, I'm still working on this and figuring out what's best, but for this legendary node I got, it makes my ultimate skills deal 30% increased damage, and it grants me 10% increased damage for 20 seconds when cast. So whenever I drop my ultimate trap, it's just more damage output, which is quite nice. I've experimented with like an insane amount of different builds, respecking all the time, and this is the most fun by far I've had. It just deletes enemies. You can do way harder content with this build, which will give you essentially better gear. So like I said, if you're starting the game off, you should definitely run up this dungeon and get that aspect right away and put it in one of your weapons. It'll just help this build along. It'll make it feel way more powerful while the leveling experience, and you'll also be figuring how the build out works earlier on after this build, so when you get to some more late game stuff and you want to do harder content, you'll be able to fly through it a lot easier. I would highly recommend, after getting that aspect, just flying through the story as fast as you can. Obviously watch the cutscenes, they're amazing. They did a great job with the story. It's really good. But yeah, all those side quests and all the exploration stuff will still be there when you get back, so just fly through the story, do it, knock it out, and once you finish the story, you can come back and explore all the zones, do all the fun stuff stuff in the zones, get the rest of your aspects. I would recommend doing the Tree of Whispers quite a bit. That will help get you geared. It will also help level you quite a bit. You get a lot of XP from doing this, and it only unlocks after you beat the main campaign. You also get your horse after the 3rd act, somewhere in the 4th act, and that's amazing to help you get through the world faster, to explore more. And definitely while you're leveling, keep it in world tier 1, and once you beat the campaign, start doing some Tree of Whispers and level some more, get some gear. Raise that up to tier 2 and do your first capstone dungeon, which will be right here. I've already completed it, so it disappeared, but it'll be in this main city right here, and you have to be on world tier 2, and you beat that. It's recommended level 50, but you can easily do it at like 40 if you have this build down. And once you complete that, you'll unlock world tier 3, which is that's where you start getting a lot better gear, and you have chances to get these sacred unique perks, which are completely amazing. So I'd highly recommend doing that. And once you're in world tier 3, you can pretty much just do everything, you know, explore all the areas, unlock everything. You definitely want to start unlocking the 3rd part of all of these to get all those extra skill points. That's 5 extra skill points, and then eventually, obviously, the last tier will give you 4 Paragon points, which is pretty big. But yeah, this build's amazing, and if you want to see more build videos like this, or just videos about Diablo 4 in general, make sure to subscribe, share with a friend, do all that amazing stuff, and have an awesome day. Make sure to get outside and touch some grass, because I know you're going to be grinding.